Right, so welcome back to Adventure 82 Tech and Games. Today we're going to solve the question of why won't this work in this? So, on first glance, there's nothing wrong. You can see that's a PAL NES. That is a PAL NES game. But this will not work in that. Why? Well, it's a short story. It's a short story, but it does go back to the 1980s, and it's worth understanding and knowing if you're going to start collecting retro consoles, especially this one, because this specific one is, as far as I'm aware, this problem is unique to this console. So let's have a look at to why this isn't working with that game. Right, so as I said before at the intro, we're asking the question why this NES game that I've got here, which is a PAL NES game, will not work in the PAL NES that I own. And that goes back to the problem that Nintendo found themselves in back in the mid 1980s. So, in the mid 1980s, Nintendo brought out the NES system. They themselves only had links to America for distribution outside of Japan. So when they released their NES, the NTSC version that was released within the United States and the NTSC version that was released all across Japan came directly from Nintendo. Nintendo didn't have a distribution network outside of Japan and America. For them, it didn't exist. So what they did is they licensed out the distribution program for what they class as the rest of the world, which actually wasn't that far a reach, to a toy company which everybody knows and loves called Mattel. The same people who made Action Man, the same people who made Barbie. Now, Mattel's distribution network for the NES wasn't that long of a reach. So the Mattel and the NES that they released became known as the Mattel version. So what Mattel set about doing was organizing the distribution for Nintendo, and this meant that the Nintendo was released into very limited countries that Mattel had reach into. The countries being the United Kingdom, Italy, Australia, and New Zealand. That's kind of it. Right, so what I've done is I've made you a map, and what you can see here is you've got NTSC in blue, you've got PAL B, which was the rest of Europe in green. You may also notice that certain parts of Europe that didn't get an NES at all. And then you've got the original PAL A, which is a Mattel release in bright red, and then there was a later 1990 release of the PAL A. Region lock system, which was done for certain parts of Asia, as well as as well as you can see South Africa, in fact, and going through into some of the Middle East. There was also an NTSC release late on, early 90s, would have been for Brazil, Argentina. There will be some countries here that probably have had also releases as well that were late on, but it's hard to tell exactly how many original authentic NES releases by Nintendo there were, because it was Nintendo had a massive issue with piracy, essentially. So there was something. The Japanese version was obviously called the Famicom. There are a lot of countries that didn't get an original NES release were making fake versions of the Famicom, and by the time that Nintendo had the distribution skills and ability to release in those countries, including some of the Eastern European countries, the prevailing fake
Famicom was such a massive issue that the NES didn't really sell as probably it would have done had they been able to control the fakes. But yeah, so this is just a basic roundup of countries and where which ones got releases, official releases. If you know of any other countries, obviously let me know. I'll update the map. But otherwise, yeah. So this is just more like a visual aid to help you along. Back to the rest of the story.
So you move through the 80s and get to kind of the mid 1980s, 1985, 1986, and Nintendo have now got enough money to organise their own distribution network. So now they can now they're able to sell their console literally worldwide. So they can now branch out from Japan and America and the limited countries that Mattel had released their console to the rest of Europe and then South America as well. The problem being is that for some reason, which nobody will ever have the answer to, as far as I'm aware, what Nintendo did is when they released their console to the rest of Europe, they then made their own kind of, they made their own PAL version of the NES, which then left you with two versions of the Nintendo just within Europe. So suddenly there's two PAL versions of an NES and they're not compatible. So you have if you class it like mainland Europe and the close counterparts, that would be the UK and Italy, which are like the main section of Europe, have one version of the NES, and then other countries like France, Germany, Austria, all the rest of the European continent have a completely different version of the NES, and the games aren't compatible either. So the games aren't interchangeable. So you end up with a PAL 1 version and a PAL 2 version. This is the bit where it gets quite unique to the NES, because no other console had ever had, before or since, had this problem. Because before it, you had things like the Amiga, the Amstrad, they were using tape cassettes. There was no region lock, it didn't matter. And then Sega had a less limited distribution network when they came to bring out their Mega Drive and their Master System, so they didn't have that problem either. This is something that was exclusive, it seems, to the NES. So the answer as to why this won't work in my PAL 1 UK, if you want to be simple about it, NES, is because this is French. And the way you can tell is if you look at the little writing here, I don't know how well that comes out, let me just check. Yeah, there, see that little writing there? It ends in F-R-A, that means France. Well, for the purposes of this video, PAL 2. If you look at this one, it ends in UKV, which means UK version. It also has additional writing on this side here, which you'll see says only compatible with the NES version of the Nintendo Entertainment System. Now, if we go back to the console I showed you before, which I've got just down here, you'll see there on the little door, it says NES version. Now, some of these actually where that says NES version will actually say Mattel version. It's the same console, it just means that this one was built after Nintendo started distributing the NES to the UK for themselves. And if you have one that says Mattel version, you had it before Nintendo had managed to organise their own distribution company. So you have one of the original NESs in the UK, essentially. There is a way around this. So normally people always will go on with these consoles and they'll look for region lock problem solving. Normally it's begun to get around NTSC to PAL or PAL to NTSC. But on this occasion, you're not only trying to, or you might be trying to unlock it to use the American games. That's a preference of your own. But for the sake of simplicity, and to be able to know that just because the game's PAL, that it works, if you've got a PAL console, this is kind of, it's probably the first console I would say that's probably a necessity to bypass the region lock. Now the region lock on an NES is pretty basic. It's just a black chip with some arms either side of it. There's two arms is the classic method of bypassing it, and then you clip the two arms on it and you bend them up so they're not making contact anymore. That will bypass it, but that also damages it. So then I was curious, is there a way to bypass the chip without cutting it and without damaging it? Because I'd rather keep the chip intact and bypass it by another method rather than cut it. So after much research, and it's really hard to find another method, because if you go on Google right now and Google a region bypass for the NES, most 99% of them, I would say, will turn around and tell you just to clip the two arms on the chip. And if you're okay with that and you don't mind damaging the chip, that's fine. But I wanted something that was less damaging so that if it didn't work, I hadn't broken my computer console. Right? So I have found another way of doing it, and it involves using two wires to bypass these specific pins on the chip you would normally cut. So what we're going to do in the next video is I'm going to show you how to bypass that chip so that you can play PAL 1 and PAL 2 games on your NES. So this will work. It doesn't matter if you have a French NES, it doesn't matter if you have an American NES, it will work for all of them, because the region bypass, this wire one, actually bypasses the chip in its entirety, which means it will actually play all types of games, not just PAL anymore. With one caveat, which is that the output of this will always be PAL. Okay, so you can bypass the region lock and you can put an NTSC game into this once you've bypassed the region lock, but the video will still come out in a PAL format, which if you've got a modern TV these days, it doesn't really matter because it bypasses it. If you're someone who's gone out and bought a slightly old school TV that has like SCART sockets and component sockets on it, which are quite hard to find, well, almost impossible SCART socket now to find on a modern day TV, then you may need to check your TV first before you do this, just because if you put if it's for the purpose of playing NTSC games anyway, because if you do this bypass and then you put an NTSC game in it and your TV can't do an NTSC signal, your game will come out black and white. The game will still show, but it will come up black and white. So if you do want to see that, then and you want to be able to play it in colour like it's supposed to be, then you'll just need to make sure that your TV is compatible with both PAL and NTSC. Just worth mentioning, because I'm not sure how many people are aware of that. But yes, if you come back with me, so in part 2 of this NES, or look at the NES, we'll look at how to get these working on that, and we'll do the bypass. I'll also show you how to clean the cartridges up, and we'll also show you how to clean the inside of your NES, the little and sort of check the press down mechanism for the cartridges, because there's a couple of things you can do just to make sure that it's putting down enough pressure and stuff, because sometimes you put these games in that don't work. Sometimes it's cartridge dirty, sometimes it's the socket on the other end on the NES, sometimes it's actually the little pressure pad you press down when you push the game in. Used to. So it can be that as well. So we'll have a look at all those things in my NES, and we'll do the bypass, in the next video. But that, for now, is the story of why this will not work in all PAL consoles. Until next week, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon. Bye.